I never thought a simple pair of heels could change everything. I had always laughed at the idea of cross-dressing, thinking it was something only other people did, a secret they kept tucked away behind closed doors. But that afternoon, my world shifted in the most unexpected way. It started at my friend Myra's apartment. She had this boutique-style collection of shoes and clothes, the kind that made your jaw drop. I was there to help her rearrange some boxes, but she had other plans. She held up a pair of sparkling black heels, delicate but tall, with a heel that could rival any runway model's. "Try them," she said, not even as a question, more like a challenge. I laughed nervously, telling her I couldn't even walk in sneakers without tripping. She smirked and insisted, placing them in front of me. My curiosity, or maybe something deeper I couldn't name, made me slip them on. They fit as though they were made for me. That's when it began, a strange mixture of panic and excitement curling in my chest. The first step was wobbly, awkward, even embarrassing, but it felt electric, like a door had opened in my mind that I didn't know existed. Myra didn't pressure me further. She just let me wobble around, watching, smiling with that knowing expression I couldn't read. I felt exposed but alive, every awkward shuffle through her living room making me hyper-aware of my body in ways I had never considered. It was terrifying and thrilling all at once. I caught my reflection in her mirror and froze. The heels changed my posture, the way I carried myself, and even the shape of my legs somehow. It wasn't about vanity, it was something deeper, almost primal. My mind raced. Who was this person staring back at me? I quickly took the shoes off, heart pounding, convincing myself it was a silly, fleeting thing. But the seed had been planted. By the next day, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I found myself scanning online shops, looking at heels, skirts, dresses, items I had never considered before. The idea terrified me. I couldn't understand why the thought of wearing them felt like a pull I couldn't resist. I convinced myself it was curiosity, a harmless phase. I started small, sneaking a pair of flats from Myra's collection and wearing them under my jeans at home. The sensation of the shoe against my foot, the subtle lift, the way it shifted my balance, it was intoxicating. I began experimenting more. Each evening, I would set up a little corner of my room with a mirror, a chair, and the pieces I had borrowed from her wardrobe. Sometimes I dressed fully, sometimes partially, but each time it felt more like coming home to something I didn't even know I had been missing. And yet, I couldn't tell anyone. The thought of someone discovering this side of me filled me with dread. I worried about judgment, laughter, alienation. So I kept it secret, a hidden ritual I indulged in when I was sure no one could see. The thrill was in the secrecy, the pulse of fear that ran through me every time I adjusted a strap, slipped on a skirt, or balanced precariously in heels. It became my private world, a mix of comfort and tension. But secrets have a way of unraveling themselves. One night, Myra came over unexpectedly. I was in full attire, heels clicking softly against the wooden floor, adjusting a necklace when she stepped in. I froze, my heart hammering. She didn't gasp or scold. She just watched quietly, an unreadable expression on her face. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe, imagining the worst. And then she smiled, a soft, almost conspiratorial smile, and said, "I knew you'd try them sooner or later." Relief washed over me, quickly replaced by an odd embarrassment. I wanted to disappear, to shove the heels in a box and pretend this never happened. But Myra's calm, unjudging presence gave me courage I hadn't realized I was missing. She didn't push me to explain, but over time, she became my confidant. We talked, tried new outfits, experimented with accessories, and she taught me how to walk, how to carry myself, how to feel the shift of energy that came from each piece. I began to see the transformation wasn't just about clothing. It was about how I understood myself, how I could express facets of me that had been buried under years of expectation and habit. I didn't realize it yet, but the heels were no longer just shoes. They were a trap, a beautiful, intoxicating trap that pulled me into a version of myself I hadn't dared to explore. It started to feel like the heels had a will of their own. The more I wore them, the less I could resist. Every evening, after everyone else in the house was asleep, I would retreat to my room, pull out my collection, and step into the small world I had created for myself. The The thrill had a new edge now. It wasn't just about curiosity or play, it had become a compulsion, a need I couldn't explain. I would stare into the mirror for what felt like hours, tracing the lines of my legs, the curve of my waist, the way the heels forced my posture into something unfamiliar yet natural. It was intoxicating and terrifying. I was discovering a side of myself I had never acknowledged, one that demanded to be seen but also hid in shadows. Then came the day I realized the trap had started to close. I was walking down the quiet street near Myra's apartment, heels clicking softly on the pavement, when I noticed the way people looked at me. Not in judgment, not in ridicule, but with curiosity, with acknowledgement. For a split second, it was exhilarating. But then the fear crept in, slow and insidious. What if someone recognized me? What if they told someone else? The world outside my room suddenly felt hostile, like the safety of my private ritual couldn't exist here. I turned into a shop doorway, trying to steady my racing heart, and for the first time, the thrill mingled with panic. My secret was no longer contained. It had begun to bleed into the outside world, and I had no idea how to control it. At home, things became more complicated. I started to notice subtle changes in the way I moved, the way I spoke to people, even in small gestures that I didn't realize were different. I was becoming someone else, and yet, I didn't know if I wanted to stop. Myra noticed it too. One evening, she watched me put on a new pair of heels, a shiny red pair that made my legs feel longer than they had any right to, and she said softly, almost teasingly, "You're not the same person you were when you came here last time." I tried to laugh it off, but her words stuck. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept turning over the idea of change in my mind. Was I crossing a line, or was I finally uncovering who I truly was? I was terrified of admitting it even to myself. The first real confrontation came from my own reflection. I was trying on a dress Myra had suggested, simple and elegant, and I caught myself lingering in the mirror for far too long. I realized I liked the way I looked. Not just the clothes, not just the heels, but me. The reflection staring back was confident. Poised, feminine in a way I had never allowed myself to be. A wave of panic hit. I was losing control, becoming addicted to the sensation, the look, the freedom. And yet, I couldn't stop. The heels had trapped me in this new version of myself, and every time I tried to take a step back, they whispered, silently, that I couldn't. They had me. The danger escalated when my mother walked in one afternoon. I hadn't expected her to come home early. I was in full attire, heels on, skirt and blouse perfect, makeup just enough to highlight my features. My heart nearly stopped when she appeared in the doorway. She froze, staring at me. I could feel the weight of judgment, the fear of exposure pressing down on my chest. And yet, she didn't scream. She didn't scold. She just looked, really looked, as if seeing something for the first time, and then she left the room quietly, closing the door behind her. I sank to the floor, heels still clicking faintly against the hardwood. That moment, that quiet acknowledgement, was as terrifying as it was liberating. The world was now aware of my secret, even if only partially, and I didn't know if I could ever go back. The heels weren't just shoes anymore, they were a test, a mirror, a trap I had willingly walked into. Every step in them pulled me deeper into a life I hadn't imagined, forcing me to confront my fears, my desires, and my identity. And as I sat on my bed, legs crossed and toes still tingling from the height, I realized the truth. I could either fight it and pretend it didn't exist, or I could surrender to it and see where this path led. But surrender had its price, and the more I embraced the heels, the more I felt the world outside tightening its grip, the edges of my old life fraying like threads I could no longer hold. The line between who I was and who I was becoming blurred faster than I could process. The heels had trapped me not just physically but mentally, emotionally, shaping every thought, every desire. I started to notice it in the smallest ways, the way I walked, the tilt of my hips, the subtle sway of my shoulders. Even when I wasn't wearing them, I carried myself differently, as if the heels had left an imprint on my very essence. I found myself daydreaming at work, imagining my reflection in dresses and heels, the click of stilettos against polished floors echoing in my mind. It was consuming, exhilarating, and terrifying all at once. Then came the moment that changed everything. Myra invited me to a small gathering she was hosting, a group of friends who didn't know me at all. She handed me a pair of nude heels, a matching skirt and blouse, and gave me a knowing look. "Tonight, you just be you," she said. That simple sentence shook me more than she could know. Be me. Who was I, really? The version I had hidden, the one trapped in my room, or the one the world had always known? My stomach twisted as I hesitated at the doorway, feeling the heels grounding me and lifting me at the same time. Each step toward the street was a small act of courage, my heart hammering in my chest, palms sweaty. Every glance from passers-by felt like a test, every reflection in a shop window a judge I couldn't escape. But somewhere deep inside, a strange, quiet confidence began to settle. The gathering was a storm of emotions. I laughed, I moved, I smiled, and no one batted an eye at the subtle confidence in my steps. I realized then how much I had been hiding, how much I had been denying a part of myself. The heels weren't just shoes, they were a key, unlocking courage I didn't know I had. People responded to me differently, not because of judgment but because they were drawn to the energy I carried, the way I occupied space with a grace I had never allowed myself to show. The fear was still there, underlying, whispering that this was dangerous, that I could be found out. But it no longer paralyzed me. Instead, it pushed me forward, made every heartbeat sharper, every glance more meaningful. And yet, transformation isn't simple, and acceptance is rarely neat. That night, alone in my room after returning home, I felt the weight of everything crashing in. The joy, the fear, the excitement, the shame, it all collided. I sank to the floor, heels still on, clutching them in my hands, and realized I was afraid. Not of being judged, not of anyone else, but of myself. I feared the freedom the heels gave me, feared that surrendering to this part of me meant leaving behind the life I had known. The trap had revealed itself fully. It wasn't about the shoes, it was about choice, about stepping into a version of myself I had been terrified to embrace. Days turned into weeks, and the ritual became routine, though never dull. I would experiment with hairstyles, different skirts, blouses, even coats and accessories, each new piece a test, a challenge, a thrill. Myra remained my anchor, encouraging but never pushing, letting me find my own rhythm. I discovered the subtle power of a gaze, the confidence in posture, the way the world responded when I fully inhabited this self. And yet, the fear lingered, an invisible thread pulling tight whenever I considered stepping out beyond my private sanctuary. One wrong glance, one slip of a secret, and the trap could snap shut completely. It was during one of these quiet nights that I first acknowledged the truth aloud, to myself. I didn't just like this, I needed it. The heels, the skirts, the dresses, they had become extensions of me, as essential as breath. I couldn't stop thinking about them, about the person I became when I wore them. And more than that, I realized that this side of me, the side trapped in heels, in flowing skirts, in delicate poses, wasn't just a fantasy or a phase. It was real. It was me. Fear still lingered, yes, but it had transformed into something different, a recognition that transformation is never simple, and that the price of surrendering to your true self is always a mixture of terror and liberation. By the end of that month, I could no longer deny it. The heels had trapped me in a way that was both painful and beautiful, inescapable yet freeing. Every step I took reminded me that I had crossed a threshold, that my private rituals were no longer just about curiosity or secrecy, they were about identity, about claiming a part of me I had long ignored. I understood, with a clarity that both thrilled and frightened me, that there was no going back. The trap had me completely, and for the first time, I didn't want to escape. The trap was no longer subtle. By now, it had become a force I couldn't ignore, a pulse in my veins, a rhythm in my steps that dictated my days and colored my nights. I woke up thinking about heels, about how they reshaped me, about the person I had become. And yet, even as I surrendered more and more to this life, there was still fear, that sharp, pricking awareness that the world might not accept me. I wondered how much of myself I could reveal, how much I could risk without losing the fragile balance I had found. One evening, Myra suggested something I hadn't dared to imagine, a small outing, just the two of us, into the city. She promised it would be safe, that no one would know us, that it was a chance to test the boundaries of my new self. My heart raced. Just the thought of stepping out fully dressed, heels clicking with every stride, made my stomach twist and my pulse spike. And yet, I couldn't say no. The lure of experiencing this freedom, the pull of stepping into the world as someone I had always hidden, was irresistible. We prepared slowly, meticulously. She helped me with my hair, adjusted my blouse, smoothed my skirt. The heels were the final piece, the key that locked me into this persona I had come to crave. I slipped them on and felt the familiar electric rush, the shift in posture, the subtle tilt that made me taller, more aware, more me. Myra gave me a reassuring smile and handed me a small purse. "Remember," she said softly, "you belong in this world just as much as anyone." The words were simple, but they struck something deep inside me, a chord of courage I hadn't known I possessed. The first few steps outside were nerve-wracking. The city was alive, buzzing with people, lights, and movement, and every glance felt amplified, every stare magnified. I felt exposed, vulnerable, yet an exhilaration like nothing I had ever known surged through me. My heels clicked against the pavement with confidence I didn't know I had, my skirt swaying naturally as if it belonged there, as if I belonged there. Myra walked beside me, smiling quietly, a silent anchor in this storm of new sensations. And then it happened, a simple compliment from a stranger, a brief glance of admiration from someone passing by. It was small, fleeting, but it ignited a realization that hit me like a wave. I wasn't hiding anymore. I wasn't performing for anyone. The heels hadn't trapped me in fear, they had trapped me in truth. The version of me that had been secret, that had existed only behind closed doors, was alive, present, and acknowledged, even if only briefly, by the world around me. And it felt incredible. By the time we returned home, my mind was buzzing. I sat on my bed, heels still on, reflecting on how far I had come. The trap had been real, yes, but it had transformed into something different. It wasn't a cage anymore, it was a mirror, a key, a reminder that stepping into fear often leads to discovery. I thought about the nights of secrecy, the trembling first steps, the moments of panic and exhilaration. I thought about the mirror that had become my confidant, about Myra, about the courage it had taken to claim this part of myself. And I realized something I had been avoiding for so long. I was not afraid anymore. I was free. The heels had been my trap, but they had also been my liberation. Each step I took had taught me something essential about myself, about the courage it takes to confront your own truth, about the power of embracing what scares you most. I could never go back to the way things were, and I didn't want to. The reflection in the mirror was no longer a stranger. It was me, fully realized, fully alive, and I was finally willing to let the world see. And as I stood there, heels clicking softly against the floor, I felt a quiet triumph. The trap had worked, yes, but in the most unexpected way, it had led me to myself. I had discovered strength in vulnerability, courage in fear, beauty in authenticity. And in that moment, I understood something profound. Sometimes the things that seem like cages are really the keys, and the steps we fear taking are the ones that lead us exactly where we are meant to be.